Hey guys, Chelsea here. Now in this video I'm actually going to be looking at every campaign here, as you can see, all the 4 campaigns. I'm basically looking at all of the maps in these campaigns, so if you look at all of these maps, basically every map, and basically just rating each campaign based on the maps they have, so not every Normandy map, every Moscow map, every Berlin map, and every Tunisia map. Basically looking at all of these maps and saying which ones, which campaign actually has the best maps, in my opinion. Now, the way I'm ranking it is basically looking at the average map. So, if it was based on, which campaign has the worst maps, Tunisia would actually come up first, ironically. I'm not even joking. Tunisia would end up in first if it was that case, because Normandy would end up last with swamps. Moscow would end up in second with Quarry, with second from last from Quarry. And then you have Train Station coming in third for Berlin. And I would say that's actually quite unfair, because I would argue that outside of those maps, there's some, Train Station's a pretty bad map. There's other maps like Moat, which are bad. But if you look at the other maps in Berlin, there's actually a lot of better maps in Berlin. The same with Normandy, same with Moscow. So that's how I'm going to rate it. I'm basically looking at every map, the average, and just really how good they are. Anyways, I'm going to start, of course, with what I think is the worst. Then I'm going to go basically work my way up. Anyways, let's start with the worst. For the worst, I'm actually looking at Tunisia. Now, the reason I'm going to go Tunisia as the worst is mostly because of just, some of the maps. I don't like many of these maps. I played every map and I've not enjoyed a single Tunisia map. Al-Har's okay, actually. I'd say Al-Har's the only map I've actually enjoyed. Farm is not that good. It's really not that good. The first point's a bit of a nightmare to take. Fortress is kind of boring to me. Gorge is kind of boring to me. The only map I've not played is Oasis, but I've heard bad things about Oasis. Now, I'm not going to take a look at the Destruction maps as well, because Destruction immediately would downgrade it. So, and even then, they have a Destruction for all of the started maps other than Fortress. So, Al-Har, Farm, and Gorge all have Destruction maps as well, and there's only one Conquest map, which is Al-Har, which is fine because it's Al-Har, and Al-Har's the best map in Tunisia, in my opinion. But yeah, just really bland maps. When me and my mates are playing, we actually exclude Tunisia maps. We exclude Destruction and Assault as well, and most Conquest maps. But we exclude most Tunisia maps because Tunisia maps are so bad. Farm is really bad. Gorge is pretty bad. Fortress is okay, I'd say. It was alright. Al-Har's pretty bad. It's good, but it's not as good as other maps. Al-Har's the only map that's kind of keeping Tunisia up, which is kind of sad because, well, I'd say it's probably the only map which doesn't comply well with Tunisia's playstyle of medium to long range, whereas every other map in the game kind of doesn't, in Tunisia doesn't confide with that, which is why I'd say Tunisia is getting the bottom slot. Anyways, with that being said, let's move on to the third pick. Coming for the third pick is actually Berlin. Now, I'm gonna have to say Berlin and the number 2 actually were very close. I actually had to debate over which one to put for a pretty long time. Now, I'm going to have to say the only reason I put Berlin is because the maps, especially, some of the maps just feel very samey. Especially these 3 maps. Codex Plaza, Moat, and Kroll. The only problem with these maps is that they're essentially the exact same map. Literally, they're the exact same map. Now, honestly, it's the only map in the game, I think, where, other than a Conquest map, which, of course, go to other conquest maps, but they're the exact same. Now, I do know Wilhelmstrasse and Hermann-Göringstrasse do feed to Right Chancellery, but they go from different angles. So, Wilhelmstrasse comes from the A point, whereas Hermann-Göringstrasse goes to the B point. Ministry Gardens, probably and train station are probably the only two that actually go from different areas, go to on unique maps, basically. And speaking of that, train station is a shit map. It's a really bad map, really unbalanced in favour of the defenders. I think it's the north one, or it's the west. I can't remember which one. I think it might be the west one. The north one, I think, where you start in the train station, is a little bit better. Right, and in terms of the conquest maps, they're actually pretty good. Right Chancellery is really good. Hermann-Göringstrasse is pretty good. Wilhelmstrasse is pretty good. Obviously, of course, I have to mention Seelow. Seelow is really good. It's really good. Obviously, I'd argue it could be the best map in the game. And Arbitrary Next Score is my favourite game mode, but I had to talk about these 4 maps, they're just the same map, literally 4 times. Codex Plaza East and Moat are just the same map. Literally, you start at the same point, you go most of the same point. The only difference is that Codex Plaza goes to the bridge, whereas Moat goes to the Kroll Opera House. And that's literally the exact same. Codex Plaza and Kroll are the exact same map, apart from the 4th, 5th point, where it goes into the back half of Moat or East for the Codex Plaza West, and Kroll goes into the Opera House. It's like, why? I rant over. Other than that, the support maps for Conquest are actually pretty good. I was talking about the maps here being pretty good. White Chancellery is really good, but I just think there's not enough to kind of keep it above, number 2. I think number 2 has a lot more custom creative maps, which I would say Seelow definitely. If it hadn't been for Seelow, it would be a clear number 3. It would beat Tunisia, but I'd say Seelow makes it holds its own as number 3, and pushes it towards number 2. But yeah, I'm gonna have to go with the other maps, the other campaigns. Obviously, saying the other 2, which are Normandy and Moscow, are better. Speaking of which, let's go on to number 2. For number 2, it's my favourite campaign, Normandy. Now, I will say that I know many people will be like, Normandy over Berlin, really? Now, the reason I say Normandy over Berlin is because Normandy has a bit more variety, in my opinion, in the maps. Now, I know many of these maps do feed into each other. For example, Versailles, Le Brie, Ruins of Valks, they all feed into different conquest maps. And D-Day does feed into Le Brie, but here's the thing. There's so many different maps with Normandy that it kind of feels unique. Versailles, for example, Ruins of Valks, Omir, St. Lo, and Airfield are all unique to each other, basically, to another map. The only maps I can say which feed into each other are D-Day and Le Brie, but that's it. 2 maps compared to Berlin, for example, which had 3 maps which were essentially the same, and 2 maps which fed into each other, with Wilhelmstrasse and Hermann-Göringstrasse. In Normandy, there's not that. This doesn't exist as much. Airfield, obviously, is a pretty bad map. There are pretty bad maps here, like Airfield, Chateau, Swamps. But the plus side is actually really good maps. St. Lo's a really good map. Omer's a really good map. La Brie's probably my favourite map. Maybe joint with Seelow. What other map? Ruins of Valks is a good map. The Conquest here, Le Brie Conquest and Ruins of Valks are good. Versailles Conquest is actually really good. This is actually a pretty good Conquest map, even though you don't see it that often. Couville Farm is okay. It's really just the problem with Normandy is The maps are either very, very good, in the case of Le Brie, Omir, St. Lo, or just god-awful in the case of Airfield, Swamps, and Chateau. Maps like Coolville Farm, Versamer, and that's about it, really. You know, which are average maps, are just, you know, they're the exception to the rule. It's either very, very good maps or very, very bad maps, which I think the only reason it's not number one, which obviously you know it's Moscow, out of trial of elimination, it's going to be Moscow. But I think Moscow just has the better maps in general. So let's talk about that now. Moscow is probably my least favourite campaign in terms of gameplay, but in terms of maps, it has some of my favourites. Now, I will say, like I said in the last video, Birch Grove and Fortified District are terrible maps. But, as well as Quarry, which if you saw my video, you'll know that. But, despite that, Moscow actually has some really good maps. Monastery, Manor, Bellow Lake, whatever, River, Avantgarde Collective Farm is really good. This city map's pretty good. And you also have maps like Bellow Lake, Monastery, they're all good maps. Village is alright, but I think the thing with Moscow is, you know, you look at Quarry, Fortified District and Birch Grove, and again, they're the exception. You know, and even then, Fortified District Invasion is okay. It's the Conquest map that's bad. The Conquest for Birch Grove is pretty good, in my opinion. And again, it's just like the maps in Moscow are just really good. Really, the only, you know, maps you can say which are just objectively bad are Quarry and Fortified District. And even then, like, I know people who like Quarry. Like, I know people who really love Quarry. Even if I don't like it, because it's just basically just why. I hate Quarry. And, yeah, Bellow Lake and Monastery are really good. The village here, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. That's really good. And, again, the Conquest maps as well. It has a really good variety of good Conquest maps. This city map's alright. Avantgarde's really good. Monastery and Manor and Bellow Lake are all really good. It's just you know, got a good collection of maps. Yeah. Compare this to, say, you know, Tunisia, which doesn't have really that many good maps. Berlin, which has some good maps, but, you know, it also has a pretty few stinkers, and it doesn't have many standout, you know, other than CeeLo Heights, it doesn't have any good standout. These are great maps. Normandy has good standout maps, like Le Brie and like Omer, but it doesn't have as much as Moscow. Moscow, of course, has Monastery, Bellow, you know. I'm just really rephrasing the same points here, but it's really just that. There's a lot of great maps with Moscow, and there's very few bad maps. Other than, I think the only real map you can say, this one is just god-awful, is Fortified District and Quarry. And that's it. Compare that to Normandy, which had a few, Berlin, which had a few, Tunisia, which had about most of them. Yeah, there's not really much to say about Moscow maps. Anyways, I'm going to end this video here. Hope you guys have enjoyed. Leave your thoughts on what, you know, where you'd put each campaign's maps. Like, comment, subscribe. I just realised that the Sawmill map's not even on here for some reason. That the Sawmill map where you have to cross the river. Oh, that map is torturous. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.